Welcome. This presentation is an introduction and overview of the Review Manager program of the Cochrane system. I'm going to use the example of Kitchener et al. Figure 3 to walk you through entering information to get a Forrest plot and I-squared statistics. Before continuing with this presentation, be sure that you have downloaded Review Manager 5.3, also known as RevMan 5. It's designed to be used within the Cochrane system to create the full review. We're only using this program to get a meta-analysis, the test for heterogeneity, and next week we're going to look at tests for publication bias. This system can be used for non-Cochrane reviews that have not gone through the Cochrane registration process, but because you haven't gone through that process, we're going to skip that step of logging in and follow the steps outlined here in entering the data. Here I'm showing you when you open Review Manager, this is what you're going to see. You're going to get a login prompt to log into the Cochrane system. Now you don't have that login, you're not doing a full Cochrane review, you haven't been invited to do that systematic review. That is a separate process. So cancel out of that login. And even if that gives you an error message, continue on. Then after canceling out of that login, create a new file. So that go up under the File, New, and then you're going to see this prompt, Welcome to the new review wizard. And the next step is you're going to click on Next, and it's going to indicate to you the review is not for Cochrane Library, otherwise you would have had to have logged in. And we're going to select Intervention Review. You can also choose Flexible Review. Everything that you need to do for Forrest Plot can be found under the Intervention Review. If you do choose to indicate Flexible Review, be sure to indicate Flexible Review and Prognosis. So that's what's shown here. If you choose Flexible Review, indicate the subtype of Prognosis. And that will allow for means comparisons, odds ratios, and risk ratios. You can get all of that information by just doing the intervention review process. The next step will be to give your review a title. So think about what title you want to give, and any data you enter in the program will be stored under the title name you give in this step. And that's important that you do know that and you save your work from this week because we're going to make use of it next week. So how you give the title is based on contrasts, comparisons, or open text. The intervention review is designed to start with the contrast option, so the intervention versus outcome, and then ends with the more open title option, but you can click right to the open title option. The flexible review starts with that open title option and ends with the contrast. So here is an example of the title process. So you can click on that first one. You can say an association related to some health outcome, or you can click down to the bottom, which is an open format, and you can give the title any title that you will remember. So what is the title of your review? Here's where you can indicate a title to save your files. So this slide is just the same thing, and it shows how the title page looks if you're doing a flexible review prognosis. So things are flipped around a bit, but the same options exist. So again, enter your title here. If you have it under flexible review, it looks like this. And again, click on Next. Be sure that you click on Full Review. So automatically it will indicate protocol or even sometimes title only. You want to make sure that the review opens up in a full review. That is the only way you can get the meta-analysis that we need for this process. So we want to have a Forrest plot, we want to get a summary estimate, and we want to get I-square values. In order to enter that data, it needs to be opened into a full review. So your new data file is going to look like this. So we have entered it into a full review. Your new file shows a lot of information here. We're not going to use all of that. We're going to click straight down to Studies and References. We need to skip to the Studies and References to add the authors in order to get the plots we needed. So the rest of this is information you don't need to complete. That would be if you were doing a full Cochrane review and entering it into their system. We're not doing that. And when you enter under References and Studies, click on Included Studies. And you're going to see under Included Studies, you're going to see the option to add studies. So I'm showing you the screen. You see the screen on the right side. We're going to References to Studies, Included Studies, and on the right screen under Text of Review, the very top subcategories, Included Studies, and there's a button to click on Add Studies. You want to click on the Add Study option. This is how you're going to indicate to the program how many studies and specify which ones and how they'll look in your plot. So here, if you click on the Add Study, this screen will appear, and here you can simply write author et al., or you can specify whichever author you're looking at and the year. And here you could already click Finish, and then you can go to your next study, Add Study, and continue like that. If you click on the Next button, it looks different. So if you click on Next, it looks like this. It's just indicating published data only, unpublished or not sought. This is the standard process, so I'm just showing you what it looks like if you go through all of the Next buttons. And then it's automatically going to enter the year. If you use the author et al., year format, it's going to recognize the year already. So you actually don't need to enter that, but you can double check that the correct year has been entered. Okay, the next screen allows you the opportunity to add an identifier. We're not going to do that, but this would be if you wanted to do a sub-analysis on different types of studies. You could add identifiers to indicate those types of studies here. In the description that I'm going to give you for adding in the Kitchener, there are no possibilities for sub-analysis, so we're going to skip this step. But if you do have a sub-analysis you want to do, you could play around with it here. So now that you have finished that, so you have all those 3 included studies added, then we're going to go down to data and analysis. So if you don't have those included studies added, we can't actually add data for the studies. So we're going to click on the data and analysis option that's underneath the references to studies. So we see this on the left screen and on the right screen. On the left screen, which is sort of more of a summary of all the different subheadings, you see that data analysis occurs underneath the studies and references. And then when you click on that on the right screen, you'll see data and analysis, and you have a box to add comparison. You need to click on that box, Add Comparison. And once you click on that box, it will give you the opportunity to name that comparison. So whether that's exposed versus unexposed, indicate the name of that comparison or contrast. If it's one particular type of intervention, school-based interventions, or randomized controlled trial, indicate here a comparison that will be descriptive of your Forrest plot. Then if you click on Next, you'll see you have an opportunity to indicate what you will do after the wizard is closed. And you need to not just add the comparison, that's the exposure part, we need to be able to add an outcome under that new comparison. So make sure that you indicate add an outcome under the new comparison. Of the 3 options, it's the middle of the 3 options. And then here we get to indicate to Review Manager what type of outcome we're entering. Is it a dichotomous outcome? If it's a dichotomous outcome, you need to have all the components of your 2x2 tables and your sample size for your exposed and unexposed groups separately. Or if it's an intervention, the same thing, but with your sample sizes for your intervention versus your non-intervention or your control group separately. And here under the description, it tells you what kind of information you need. You need to enter the number of participants with the event, the outcome, and then the total number of participants in the experimental and the control groups. So that's the option for dichotomous. You also have an option to enter information that is continuous, and this would be information where you have data on means, standard deviations, and or the number of participants. It will only work if you have the sample size and the number of participants in both the control and in the experimental groups, and if for both groups you have the mean and the standard deviation. So if you're looking at mean comparisons and you have two studies that both look at mean BMIs, that as an example, that will only work if you have the mean, the standard deviation, and the sample size of all of your comparison groups that you're entering. So this slide is just indicating that in addition to the odds ratios, risk ratios for the first option, dichotomous, or the mean differences that you could indicate with continuous, there are additional options that you have: observed minus expected, generic inverse variance, and other data. We're not using those. If you want to explore those, if you think it might fit your data, go ahead and look at them, and if you have questions, let me know. Before you enter the forest plot, explore the options for the outcomes to enter. Identify the data where you have necessary information, and look to see that you have all the details of the numbers you need. So you might actually want to go through a practice trial of this just to see what kind of data you would need and to double check that you have that information. And so anything that you need to calculate by hand, odds ratios or risk ratios, you would need all those details, and you would need the sample sizes separately for the exposed and the unexposed groups. If you have information on mean differences, you definitely will need to have the standard deviations, and you'll need to have the sample sizes for your exposed and unexposed, or alternatively your intervention and your control groups. Your assignment is to create a forest plot using your own data. If it's not possible for you to do a forest plot with the data available, then you'll need to, in your systematic review, write up a text in your results explaining why it's not possible to create a forest plot and include that information also in your discussion. But for this week, it's important that you create a forest plot. If you don't have information from your own data, go ahead and use the example that I'm following here with Kitchener and create it with different title names and other indicators so that I can see you've done it yourself. And save it as an MS Word or a PDF file, submit to Blackboard, and that will complete the assignment, but it will also give you the experience hands-on of entering this information for yourself. Upload your forest plot to Blackboard under assignments, and it will give you the opportunity to discuss on the discussion board any issues or problems that you faced in the process of creating your forest plot or any questions you have to improve it. So we're going to start with at least 3 publications. You can add additional publications in. You can start with 3 publications and add to it later as you go through the process and finalizing your systematic review. But this is a first practice in doing a systematic review with a forest plot and meta-analysis. So here is a figure showing self-reported information. This is data from Kitchener et al. That's in the systematic review that you were given in week 1. And this is data directly taken from figure 3 of the forest plot. And I'm using this because it's important that you can replicate the process, and you can also double check your forest plot against the data in figure 3. So if you can't use your own data, use the example to demonstrate application. Use this example to prepare the steps of the process for your own data, and also just to practice. So include at least 3 studies to walk through the example. You can add more later. If you can't do a forest plot, be sure to explain why in the text of your systematic review, and replicate this process using data from Kitchener. That's going to help you in knowing how to approach forest plot using your own results. And even if that gives you an error message, continue on. Then after canceling out of that login, create a new file. So that go up under the File, New, And then you're going to see this prompt, welcome to the new review wizard. And the next step is you're going to click on next, and it's going to indicate to you the review is not for Cochrane Library, otherwise you would have had to have logged in. And we're going to select intervention review. You can also choose flexible review. Everything that you need to do for Forrest Plot can be found under the intervention review. If you do choose to indicate flexible review, be sure to indicate flexible review and prognosis. So here is an example of the title process. So you can click on that first one. You can say an association related to some health outcome, or you can click down to the bottom, which is an open format, and you can give the title any title that you will remember. So what is the title of your review? Here's where you can indicate a title to save your files. In the next screen, be sure that you indicate that you're doing a full review. Without this, you won't be able to enter the data that you need and to get a Forrest plot. Then enter a full review, click on that function of the three options, it's the lower one, and click on Finish. So here you will be open to the screen to click on the references to studies. So here's where we go back to some of the background information I gave before. Click on the references to the studies, and then click on Included Studies and the box Add Study. So you see this on the left side under Studies and References, but on the right side you see the subheading Included Studies and the box Add Study. Click on that Add Study, and then one at a time you can add the references. So that is study ID, each one by author et al. Year format. That's the easiest way. And for each one, simply add author et al. Year and then click on Finish. Now you can go through all the next options so you can see everything in between, but since we're not changing anything, the simplest way is to simply go to author et al. And then Finish, and add the other two studies in the same way. So go back, add study, Edinger et al. 2009, Finish, add study, Nakamura et al. 2010, Finish, and then you see under references to studies and the included studies, all three references should appear. Now they're all empty because you didn't necessarily download the studies into the system. It doesn't make sense to do that. This is really just to enter those names so that we can create a Forrest plot. So the next step is under data and analysis to add comparison, and you're going to see that I've already added two different mean difference comparisons underneath data and analysis. That's in previous versions. So in order to get those to appear, you need to go under data and analysis and you need to hit that button, Add Comparison. And then you need to give it a title. In this case, Clinical Insomnia Outcomes would be an example. And then hit the button Next. And we have to hit Next here because we need to still add an outcome under the new comparison. So the intervention is our comparison, but we have to have an outcome. And the outcome options are dichotomous or continuous. We're selecting continuous because we're looking at means and standard deviations. And then when you click on Finish here, it's going to open up into a page that allows you to start entering your data. So here we have a view of the Forrest plot. It's empty, and the tables that are empty, we need to add the studies in order to enter information that could then be used to create the Forrest plot. So we need to click on Add Studies, and this screen will appear once you click on the blue plus icon at the top. So it's in the row with MD, mean differences, and fixed effects. If you click on that green plus icon, it will give you the option of selecting the studies that you've entered. So control and highlight all the studies and click on Finish. Then once you've done that, all of the studies that you've entered will appear and those rows will become white instead of gray. If you click on the left side table, you can enter the means, the standard deviations, and the sample sizes. Now, if you look on the table, you can see that it's the plus sign. Right next to the plus sign is an icon MD. Those should be SMD, standardized mean differences, and the icon fixed effects will be shifted to random effects based on the methodology outlined by Kitchener et al. So here, standardized mean difference is the outcome. Enter the mean, standard deviation, and the sample size for the intervention and control. And all of the data is entered here into that table. And you see that the Forrest plot appears on the right. That will simply appear as you enter the data. So for every row that you enter, a green dot will appear for the mean difference, standardized mean difference, and the confidence interval will appear. Now, in order to see the full Forrest plot results, after you enter each result, you'll see it on a short screen, but if you want to see the full screen, click on the Forrest plot icon. That's the fourth icon in from the plus add study icon. And in clicking on that, you're going to see the full results. So that means your pooled meta-analysis result or your pooled effect estimate at the very bottom. So that's the total value minus 0.29 and its confidence interval. You can't see this in the Forrest plot because the black arrow just approaches the 0 bar and you can't tell whether or not it crosses. So by looking at the confidence interval for the mean difference, you can see that the standardized mean difference crosses 0, so no effect is within the 95% confidence interval. You can also see that the value for the I-square is 0%. So we don't expect a lot of heterogeneity given these three values. Here's an expanded view of the Forrest plot again, pooled estimate, confidence interval, and the I-square. And in order to save these results, click on the copy function. So at the very bottom, left bottom of the Forrest plot, you have the options to, for example, save the Forrest plot. That's not in a format that you can easily use. You could also print the Forrest plot. Again, it would come out as a PDF. So you could directly copy this using the icon for the copy function and paste it directly into an MS Word file. So if you wanted to use it directly in your systematic review, when you have a Forrest plot ready, you can go ahead and paste it in. So be sure to double check your results if possible against a systematic review. So if they have already reported a Forrest plot, check based on the information that they have before you start adding additional studies, just to see how close your Forrest plot is. In this case, there's small differences with the Kitchener results. The pooled estimate that Kitchener gives is not minus 0.29 but minus 0.28. Okay, so hopefully you have gotten through to the end and you have results from Kitchener et al. That you can compare directly to that article and to my results. Any major differences could be related to options at the top of the Forrest plot. So if you check your results to mine and they're identical, then you're fine. There may be small differences with the Kitchener result because of possibly additional data that they had entered to do corrections. So major differences could be explained by if you have the mean difference function on instead of standardized mean difference, if you have fixed effects instead of random effects, although that shouldn't make a difference, or if you have a data entry error. So double check those things and save your file so that next week we can add to the Forrest plot in case you have a systematic review that you're building up, and revise your Forrest plot and pooled estimate, or to generate a funnel plot, which we're going to need for next week. Thank you.